Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our session on digital transformation and how to transform hiring. You know, digital transformation is something that's been happening to us and around us since the 90s. But it wasn't until a few years ago that businesses started to get really laser focused on digital transformation as a strategy. An IDC report from last year projected that digital transformation spending would approach $7.4 trillion between 2020 and 2023. And that was last year's projection. So before coronavirus sent us into socially distant corners and forced businesses to condense their digital transformation timeline from years to weeks. A lot has changed in a few short months. So our guests today from Boston Market and Verisk Analytics will talk about what digital transformation looks like now, how plans and strategies have changed, and how they're using technology to tackle new challenges in HR and talent acquisition. We've teamed up with Talent Reef to present this webinar today. Talent Reef is one of our ATS partners, but really they are the HR software platform powering the service industry. They provide social recruiting and talent management systems specifically built for the hourly workforce. At Outmatch, we have deep roots in the service industry, and we're also really excited to see our assessments and video interviewing solutions support digital transformation in the corporate world too. So again, I'd like to say thank you for being here. The past few months have been a roller coaster for all leaders in all types of businesses. But I hope that by coming together to share successes and lessons from others on the digital transformation journey, you'll find some clarity for your next steps. My name is Brianna Harper, and I'm your webinar host. I'm also a resource for any questions you have during the session or anytime after. We've planned about 35 minutes for our panel discussion today. After that, we'll open it up to Q&A. So I'd love to hear your questions and how you're navigating. So feel free to type in the questions queue anytime something comes to mind. After the session, I'll send out today's slide deck and a link to the recording. If you have any questions that don't get answered today or that you think of after the session, please feel free to reach out. You can email me at bharper@outmatch.com or find me on social at OutmatchHCM. So now I'll stop talking so you can meet the real stars of the show. Ariel Gerard, corporate and field recruiter from Boston Market, Jennifer Brienza, talent acquisition lead from Verisk Analytics, and Tim Leonard, who's going to moderate our panel discussion today. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at Talent Reef. Ariel, Jennifer, Tim, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'd love for each of you to tell us a little bit more about yourselves. So Ariel, let's start with you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Ariel, and I am the corporate and field recruiter here for Boston Market. We've been the rotisserie chicken experts since 1985, and I have been very fortunate enough to be their recruiter for nearly 2 years now. I wear many hats in the HR department. However, my main priorities are to focus on creating competitive recruiting strategies and building onto our strong teams.
Awesome. Thank you, Ariel. Jennifer, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I'm a talent acquisition regional lead for the Americas at Verisk. I work from their headquarters, which is in Jersey City, New Jersey. So at Verisk, we provide data and insights to our customers in insurance, energy, and the financial services markets so that they can make faster and more informed decisions about risk. So my team and I there, we lead full life cycle recruiting for our corporate center roles, as well as the financial services vertical. And we also manage the overall interview scheduling function for the entire global TA team.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Tim, over to you.
All right, thank you, Brianna. Welcome, everyone. I'm Tim Leonard, and I've got 20 years experience in recruiting and HR technology, including running my own recruiting firm, founding the market's first social recruiting technology platform, And for the past few years, serving as the Chief Strategy and Product Officer at Talent Reef, where along with our CEO, I lead the company's product vision and innovation roadmap. So welcome, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Ariel. Let's get to it. So really quick before we begin, I just wanted to give you a preview of the next couple webinars in our Future of Work webinar series. Next month, we'll look at Twitter's recent decision to let employees work from home forever. We'll explore what this might look like for non-tech companies, what to consider when making a decision like this for your business, and how companies will support remote work long-term. Then in September, we'll look at barriers to diversity in hiring, barriers that most companies don't even realize are there, and changes you can make so you're not excluding non-privileged groups from jobs that they'd be really great at. One last thing, today's session is valid for 1 professional development credit for the SHRM CP or the SHRM SCP. So look for that activity ID from me at the end of the webinar. All right, so the first thing before we get into the panel discussion, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you all in the audience. So I've got 3 quick polls I'm gonna launch. I'm gonna put each one up for 15 to 20 seconds each. Get your answers in, and then we'll move to the next one, and we'll talk about the results at the end. So I'm gonna put the first one up on your screen so everyone can get their answer in. All right, it's open now. So this first question is, what does hiring look like in your business right now? Have you had to do a hiring freeze? Are things kind of hiring as usual, or are you seeing a hiring surge? Take a couple seconds to get that answer in. All right, I'll close this out and share the responses, but I'm seeing 51% voted for hiring as usual, which is awesome in a state of disruption to be able to say that something is somewhat usual. All right, so the answers to our first poll are up on the screen. Like I said, 50% of you voted for hiring as usual, with some of you saying hiring freeze and hiring surge on the other end of that spectrum. All right, that was poll 1. Let's move to poll 2. All right, this one is, how has social distancing changed your hiring process? So you might say that it hasn't changed. You had digital processes in place already, or it hasn't changed because you're still doing things on site like you did before. You might be limiting, so doing things the way you did before, but limiting some of these interactions, or you're really focused on making the shift from on-site processes to digital processes. I see the votes coming in. Looks like a pretty close tie between C and D, limiting the number of on-site interactions and shifting to digital processes. So go ahead and get your answers in if you haven't voted yet, and then I'll share these with everyone. All right. So the answers on your screen right now, the winner is shifting to digital processes, which probably isn't a huge surprise since you're attending a webinar like this, but I just wanted to gauge the audience to see where everybody's at. All right, one more quick poll from everyone. Thank you so much for your participation. All right. Last poll on your screen. What's your top recruitment challenge right now? Is it sourcing? Is it managing a higher number of applicants? Is it rehiring furloughed employees? Interviewing, whether that's remote or in-person interviewing, or the onboarding piece? How do you do that safely in today's environment? So looks good, getting everybody's answers in here. The leader right now is getting people to apply. So that's really good to know, so we can focus our conversation today on the challenges that you guys are facing. All right. Closing that now. Answers are on your screen, so you can see that A was the winner there, getting people to apply. So we'll definitely dig into that. Tim, did you see anything surprising to you in these poll results? Is this what you're seeing with your clients at Talent Reef?
Yeah, it really is, Brianna. You know, it's right on. You know, certainly, you know, dealing with, you know, convincing applicants that they should apply. You know, that businesses, as usual, although we know it's kind of the new normal, but really taking advantage of your content and communications that you're sharing with potential applicants. I think that's more important than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll find out more about Ariel and Jennifer's experience with some of these challenges, as well as they talk through our panel discussion. So Tim, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Brianna. So we know, as Brianna stated, you know, COVID has certainly brought about a myriad of changes and new challenges. You know, work from home, and we've all been Zoomified at this point. And we think in that service industry, you know, how curbside takeout and delivery and curbside pickup, I should say, takeout and delivery are really kind of dominating the landscape. So the first question, when COVID started, what impact did it have on your business? Maybe Ariel from Boston Market, you could jump in here.
Yeah, absolutely. So when COVID started, it impacted the restaurant industry, among other industries, pretty hard. You know, we followed by all state regulations and guidelines, so we ended up closing down our dining rooms as well as some of our locations as a whole. Of course, that triggered a reduce in the need for labor. So, you know, unfortunately, we did have to furlough some of our employees and put a hold on our recruiting as well.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And how about on your side, Jennifer?
Yeah, so I mean, we pretty much all of the employees at Verisk went remote. You know, pretty much overnight, it happened. As far as our hiring, we didn't do an actual hiring freeze. We took a very close look at our active jobs that we were recruiting for, and just really identified the most critical to the business. And for the most part, we kept moving forward with them in hiring, and then the others that we paused temporarily were some of them, and we just made sure to really do a good job of communicating, you know, what that was all about with our candidates, so that if and when we do pick back up for certain roles that we're hiring for, we can, you know, open up those conversations again and hopefully engage those candidates to come to work for us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I think in terms of, you know, change to our businesses, whether you're in the service industry or in a corporate environment, we really more than ever live in a trust economy today, in my view, where, you know, applicants, employees, and even customers really are looking at us as businesses and leaders of those businesses, as well as HR, to really ensure that, you know, we're taking all the necessary steps to, you know, create a safe work environment, and that we're communicating all of those steps that are being taken. So whether somebody's going into an interview or we're dealing with a customer as a frontline employee, that all of those necessary steps and protocols are in place. I think we go to the next question probably and dig in a little bit deeper. And maybe we can start with Jennifer from Verisk. What's changed in your hiring process and or your strategy since COVID?
Yeah, so a couple things. I think we've seen a surge of applicants on the entry-level side, so just kind of dealing with that and finding ways to quickly and efficiently source and screen candidates. So we've been using the digital interview platform WePow to help us get through that. So it's creating a really nice experience for our candidates. We are able to review how they've performed in that digital interview, and then being able to kind of push them through the interview faster. And then I think, you know, just as far as the point that I mentioned before, just really being mindful about the way we communicate what's going on to the candidates that have applied for roles we're not moving forward with, and also just doing, I think, a better job of sourcing for the roles that are still the difficult to fill. And so some that come to mind are just the cloud security roles, so being more mindful in the way that we source and where we look for candidates.
That's great. That's great. And with the remote video interviewing, do you feel like there was a lot of change management to get your recruiters or hiring managers to embrace and adopt this kind of newer paradigm? I mean, video interviewing has been around for a long time, but certainly we're seeing a big spike in usage. Any issues with change management or getting folks to embrace that paradigm?
I think that just communicating the benefits of it, so using the digital platform, it takes an extra step to create the experience that the candidate is going to have and taking that digital interview, but the benefits of being able to screen them much faster. And then I think just in general, the virtual interviews that hiring managers are now having with candidates and ultimately making a hiring decision, just based on seeing someone on a video camera rather than having that face-to-face sit-down interaction that they're used to.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if you can weave the video interview experience into that workflow, it can really be seamless both for the applicant and for the manager. And I've actually used weaving firsthand, so I know get a nice seamless workflow experience. I think that makes a big difference. How about you, Ariel, from Boston Market?
Yeah, so with us, our hiring managers, our field operators are very tenured. So I think that they're pretty old-fashioned. They like to see people face-to-face. So I think that this is the biggest challenge for them, is to really revert into, we do more of a phone screen for the first interview for our field positions. And we really reiterate that making that and building that relationship over the phone on the phone call is very important, especially since we can't do those face-to-face conversations. It's not as easy because a lot of people are not showing up to the in-person interview, to be expected with the current environment. So we've provided some great tips and tricks and guides on how to create and build those relationships over the phone on the first call. And then in a variety, our corporate positions are a little bit different. We've reverted more to virtual interviews or web interviews and phone interviews for our corporate positions until they reach the final stage of the interview process, and then it would turn into that in-person interview as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of getting back to this theme of contactless and digital, really anywhere that it makes sense to provide automation across those interactions. Again, whether they're with applicants or employees, I think really is going to give companies a competitive advantage. To that end, I know we've seen a big rise in the use of text apply, which is one of the features of the Talent Reef tech stack. And we've also seen other areas being leveraged, such as interview scheduling, automation, and pre-screening automation. Curious to see if anyone's leveraged things like that, any new technology that you haven't used before, that you're trying during COVID, or you were using before and now you're amplifying.
So we actually just started using the Talent Reef Recruit 2.0 right before COVID happened. So it's kind of great. It's perfect timing for us because it kind of set us up for success. So we are starting to use that text to apply, which has really been a big hit for our restaurants, as well as, we use SMS and email campaigns and different other opportunities and tools that Talent Reef Recruit 2.0 really provides to us. It really helps us because we get to, communicate with the candidates digitally. The text to apply, it takes out a couple of steps in the application process instead of having to go and go online and search for the position on our website and everything. In the text to apply, it allows them to just click a button and it brings them exactly where they need to be to submit the application. So it's been really beneficial for us, both, with us being able to capture a lot more candidates, as well as makes it easier on the candidate side also, especially right now since, I'm sure that they're submitting quite a bit of applications.
Yeah, that's a great use case, Ariel. And you certainly know in the service industry, that you're dealing with a lot of millennials and Gen Zs, and they're stitched to their mobile devices, whether they're smartphones or just a mobile device. And this is how they interact and engage. So providing a frictionless way to apply for jobs, to receive updates and communications by mobile phone really is a differentiator, almost a must-have at this stage. And I think it really goes the same with corporate type positions where now people are working from remote, working from home, and they're also likely to be responding to things on their mobile phone, maybe even more so than email in some cases. I'd be curious, Jennifer, on your side of Verisk, other technology that you've experimented with outside of video interviewing during COVID.
And so I think it's more around process. We've really had to get comfortable with virtually onboarding new hires. So as a recruiter, that's always, the question that you get at the point of making an offer, well, how will this work? So I think, Verisk has done a really good job of being able to get out the technology, laptops, and everything that new hires need to become productive starting day one. And then also the onboarding experience and how we deliver that now virtually, making people comfortable and aware of all of our benefits. And then just I think the IT support that's provided along the way to new hires to get them up and running with their equipment and access to all of the drives and networks that they need, and then partnering with hiring managers to make sure that there's a really, set process in place as how to onboard them, get them trained, and virtually introduced to their new colleagues.
Yeah, that's terrific. Makes a lot of sense. I guess the last point on this question, I've seen across our client base a real increase in dependency on pre-screening as they see new skills and competencies being required to do certain jobs. Front of house workers, as an example, need to have a little bit more of that customer service orientation, kind of more soft skills. So I'm kind of curious to see in either your case, Ariel, or yours, Jennifer, if there are some ways you've actually been tweaking some of your pre-screening, either questions or assessments or methodologies to really kind of identify applicants that would be a fit for the current climate.
I can jump in here. Yeah, I think focusing on some of the screening questions that we're using a lot of behavioral-based questions to assess those skills, so customer focus, communication skills, and also I think just one's level of comfort with being adaptable and being able to pivot in a time of uncertainty. So building that into the list of questions that we go through during the interview process to make sure that we're making the right decision and the candidates that we're bringing on that will do well in the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's terrific. Maybe we can go to the next question. And we can start here with Ariel from Boston Market. Ariel, how are candidates and hiring managers reacting to all of these changes? I know we've touched on a little bit of that, but any other specific examples?
I can tell you that, for our more so entry-level positions in our restaurants, we're seeing a really lack of applications in our system. I think that candidates are really nervous to really get out there and start working again, as well as, although it's changing. The unemployment benefits, I think that, that again, they're less likely to show up in the in-person interview right now. So I think that, again, building that relationship over the phone, building that relationship with the candidate is very important. Being open and letting them know what the company is doing to keep our guests and our employees and everyone safe throughout the process, and making sure we're communicating all of that information to them so they know what to expect, especially on that first call. Hiring managers, again, as I mentioned, our hiring managers, they like that face-to-face interaction. So it's a little bit different transition for them. However, I think that over time they're going to get more comfortable with it, and with the amount of hiring that we do in our restaurants, they'll realize that it's going to be beneficial to them going down the road to really get more digital and be able to screen more candidates in a faster time as well.
Yeah, and Ariel, you raised such a good point about the importance of communications and digitizing communications. Can you give any examples of different tools you're using, or ways that you're communicating, whether it's career pages, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have communication on our company website. We have communication on our career page, third-party company sites, and then we also sometimes put it on our job description as well, what the next step in the process, interview process is, and then again, including the information on what to expect if they are selected for a position with us. So a lot of communication, whether it's on a website, whether it's speaking one-on-one to people. We would prefer to over-communicate than under-communicate.
Yeah, that's critically important. Jennifer from Verisk, how about on your side?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think over communicating, definitely communicating more frequently, the picking up the phone and actually sharing the information that's available to make sure people are comfortable and can ask questions, and just provide feedback in general to make sure that they are comfortable. So I think we've done a better job of that. I know, for me, I find it more effective picking up the phone versus the rapid emails that I think we're all used to. But just that connection, actually speaking with someone, I think has really helped us communicate a lot better.
Yeah, fantastic. And Jennifer, you touched a little bit earlier on the remote kind of digitized onboarding. Is that experience been running smoothly? Are you finding that your new hires are showing up to work feeling kind of ready and confident?
Yeah, so I mean, I know, I'm sure there were some bumps along the way, but for the most part, it's worked really well. And here in the U.S., other countries that we have employees in, as we've done a great job of making sure that they get their equipment, they're connected with someone on the IT side that can just help them log into their computer on their first day and set up passwords. And so I think the overall reaction from the folks that I have hired has been really good. People have found it pretty easy to get up and running pretty quickly and connected with their managers and the colleagues that they have to interact with day to day.
That's great. That's really good. Really awesome. And I guess, Ariel, maybe one closing question for you on this topic. I know for a lot of our service industry clients, they had done some furloughs, like we talked about early with the survey here, and they're rehiring in many cases some of those employees back. Can you touch a little bit on the kind of the rehiring process and what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. In order to ensure that restaurants are set up for success, we provide an eligible rehire list that includes all of the employees' names, most recent, the position, and their contact information as well. And so the area director is in charge of contacting these employees and see if they're ready and interested to come back to work with us. With the crew members, where we, are rehiring quite a bit of our furloughed, crew members, we are setting them back to active in our system rather than going through the application system. That way, again, we can get our restaurants filled back up again. And then for managers and above, they go through our normal application process. Since managers here again are very tenured, it allows us to run an updated background check, I-9, and we know that they're up to date on reviewing our policies and procedures during the onboarding process as well. So it really kind of helps us out on the back end too, as well as getting, everyone, all of the employees back into their position and getting ready for this transition again.
Awesome. Yeah, that's terrific. Well, very, very good. Let's go to the next question. Maybe we start with Jennifer from Verisk. What's your top priority in talent acquisition, talent management right now, and how does digital transformation support that priority?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest shifts is around diversity and inclusion. So creating a strategy to help us increase the level of diversity, presenting diverse slate of candidates to hiring managers. And so I think that what we are looking at right now is looking at different technologies that can help us analyze our job descriptions to make sure that we are using the right type of language to encourage application, and looking at ways where we can kind of just revamp the way that we write our job descriptions. So focusing more on the must-haves versus the nice-to-have, so that we can kind of help resolve that confidence gap between men and women and how they think when they apply. And I think just overall, just looking at internal mobility and looking at existing employees and how we can utilize skill sets to promote them into different opportunities, encourage them to take on different types of roles. I think that's one of the biggest things that we're focusing on right now.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I think it's interesting. We live in this world right now where two major forces have collided, obviously with the pandemic, and then just the heightened emphasis on diversity and inclusion, and how it's really kind of game time into kind of step things up in that area. What's kind of interesting is how we can be leveraging digital media and content as a mechanism for communicating what we're doing in these different areas to make applicants and employees feel like you're really addressing these top issues in a best-in-class way, even using things like videos from CEO or HR leaders, especially when it comes to things like diversity and inclusion. Jennifer, do you see some applicability for really leveraging digital content?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that we're looking at is just, and you touched on it, using videos. So using videos of current employees. So rather than the traditional job posting with bullet point after bullet point, using little videos kind of embedded into what normally would be just an endless list of responsibilities and requirements to really communicate the employees and how they've done well, the exciting aspects of working for the company. So I think that that's something we're going to look to do a lot more in all of our different roles.
Fantastic. And Ariel from Boston Market, your top priority in talent acquisition right now, and how digital transformation supports that priority?
Yeah, so we are mainly focusing on restaffing our restaurants. We're starting to open up our dining rooms. We're opening up new locations, so making sure that our restaurants are staffed to be able to take care of our guests, as well as filling our corporate positions that we've realized that we've had opportunity areas in, especially through COVID. So being able to better support the new needs of the business. So we continuously review our recruiting strategy to make sure that we keep that competitive edge. And digital transformation, it really helps support these priorities, again, by, being able to reach a broader, a broader group of people, as well as a lot more people, and in real time as well. So it really helps out with that. We've reached that broader candidate pool. If I was doing organic recruiting, I could never reach the amount of people that I can through technology, and by sending mass messages and creating campaigns and these sponsored ads, it really helps out with this process. We also have the ability, since we have a lack of applications in the field, but then an abundance of applications for our corporate positions, we're able to screen a lot of candidates out, especially utilizing, outmatch assessments. We've been able to create assessments that work for us that, our assessments are based off of our high performers. And so being able to provide that assessment to candidates who are applying to make sure that they match up, not only with our policies and procedures and culture as well is very important to us too.
Boy, that's terrific. Very, very well said. I would add on that a little bit. What we're seeing in the service industry across our customer base and even with our prospects is really a heightened emphasis on digitizing onboarding and training. Obviously, with COVID, there are all these new federal guidelines, CDC, FDA, OSHA, and many state and local guidelines that you had mentioned earlier, Ariel. So how do you make sure, essentially, how do you prove to your employees, your applicants, your customers, that you are really staying compliant, that you're following all these best practices by digitizing onboarding, making sure everyone's signing forms, that they're reading policies, updating the employee handbook, and going through some very basic, kind of COVID-related training. I kind of look at it as almost creating that digital proof or blueprint that you're compliant and you're doing all the right things. And in the service industry, this can really, at the end of the day, help you to win customers and be real competitive in this trying time that we're living in right now. So I think that's a big priority that I'm seeing with talent acquisition and talent management. Jennifer, Ariel, anything else to add on this topic?
Nothing I can think of right now. I think we went over quite a bit of that portion. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I'll jump in with a question, because Ariel, when you were talking, you mentioned things like campaigns, and I'm in a marketing role myself, so I'm seeing this really close connection and a lot of overlap between marketing and HR and talent acquisition, and this is just getting stronger and stronger as companies adopt technology and do things more scalable to reach more people, more applicants. Have you had to do any kind of crash course in marketing, or how are you building those skill sets?
Great question. That's something that I've just kind of learned over time. I really rely on our partners to really help me out with that as well. We do have some third-party partners where they help with our social media, they help with our ads, they give us advice, and just like this webinar, we have other webinars that we can go to that really provide some great insight and feedback. In addition to that, we partner heavily with our marketing department. They're able to come up with, a lot of different graphics and different quotes and things that are really going to help attract some of those candidates as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jennifer, you mentioned you guys are fully remote right now, is that right?
Yeah, we're actually moving into phase 1 of return to work for some of our different offices. So the approach is going to be, I think, over a 3-phase period. So starting off first with probably about 25 to 50% returning, and then kind of moving along from there.
Is the plan to have the full return then back to the office eventually, or will you continue to support some remote workers?
I think that the support for some remote workers, and actually seeing it more and more with new jobs that we're starting to advertise, just the more openness to remote work, which is going to help us expand the candidate pool, of course, into different regions. But yeah, from what I've seen so far, and I know that things are still to be determined, but I have seen a lot more openness to full-time remote opportunity.
Okay. Well, my question was really about, and I think you mentioned, one thing you look for is being adaptable, because it's really important for someone who is going to be onboarded remotely and potentially continue working remotely. And I know there hasn't been a lot of time to really see what's worked and what hasn't worked yet, but is there anything else you would look for in a remote worker? Anything you would try to identify as someone who'd be good working from home in the application process?
I think the ability to collaborate with colleagues around the world. We're a global organization, so being comfortable working from a home office, but still having that level of comfort, meeting people, interacting with people, collaborating on projects, just strictly done either by phone or video conference.
That's true. I mean, in Outmatch, we've gone 100% remote, working from our homes, but we had people spread out before COVID happened. So we were already having to do some of that, right? Communicate through video and try to stay connected with people that we never really see in person. So it makes a lot of sense. Those are my questions I wanted to throw out. Tim, I'll hand it back over to you.
Those are good. I love it. Thank you for helping out there. So I guess we'll go to the last, I think it's the last question. Many of our customers say they want to make technology work for them versus working for the technology. Curious, what's your take on this? Maybe we'll start with Ariel from Boston Market.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when it comes to technology, I think that it really should work for us. We have a lot of companies that we partner with, technology companies, for instance, Outmatch and Talent Reef, that are really able to configure programs that work for Boston Market, rather than, there's other companies out there where they provide different tools and things. However, you kind of have to fit in their little box or in the box of their requirements. Whereas Talent Reef, for example, you're able to configure a program where, if we have a shift supervisor, we have minimum requirements. You have to be 18 years old, you have to have a high school diploma. And so we received quite a bit of applications for our shift supervisor positions. And so Talent Reef being able to configure a program that screens out any candidates that don't meet those minimum requirements are really important for us, so we don't have to manually go through hundreds of applications for one position. We're able to see who meets that minimum requirement, which eliminates some of those, as well as Outmatch with the assessments. As I mentioned before, it really comes in handy for us if we have an abundance of applications. We're able to utilize this assessment to really screen out some of the people who just, maybe they're good at the role, they're not a good fit for Boston Market. And then on the other side with the assessments, we have the ability to turn on and off the application or the assessments as well. So, for instance, during our holiday season, we need a ton of applications because we are super busy around then. So we're able to turn off the crew member applications to open the floodgates, really, is the best way to put it. So the technology really kind of works for us and our needs, rather than us having to fit in that box and kind of choose what we want and what we don't.
Yeah, and Ariel, I mean, just listen to what you say there. Another byproduct or benefit from that automation of those kind of tactical things frees up recruiters and hiring managers to spend quality time with the vested applicants, right?
Right.
Yeah, terrific. How about you, Jennifer?
Yeah, so I think with the digital interviews, so for example, WePow being able to customize them for each individual role based on what it is that we want to get to know about the candidate has been really helpful. And then I think just some of the tools that we're using that match into our ATS, we're using a match score tool, which automatically assigns a score or a number to each applicant as they apply for a job. It helps a lot in that we can just kind of what bubbles up to the top are the candidates that receive the highest score. What we are noticing though is that AI does require some training on our part. So just providing the feedback to the tool so that they can do a better match between the job description and the resume going forward. It's a little bit of work on our part, but the payoff will be really big in the end.
Yeah, well stated. Couldn't agree more. Well, great. That's great, Ariel and Jennifer. Really, fantastic insights all the way around. Any other thoughts? And I think, Brianna, were you gonna maybe go to Q&A at this point, or?
Yeah. This is the part where we'll open it up for some audience questions. So if you have a question, go ahead and get that in. I wanted to get your thoughts, some thoughts from the panelists before we switch over to Q&A. You both mentioned different pieces of technology. So Jennifer, you mentioned WePow, which is actually the Outmatch video interview tool. And I know that you guys have been using that for a couple of years. So this was not a COVID response, right? You were on this digital transformation journey long before that. And we've actually had someone from your company on a webinar in the past, and she showed some of the videos that she's been able to create because you mentioned really the importance of video, especially now. So it was really cool to see her videos. She kind of walked around the office inside this video interview experience where she could introduce candidates to the yoga studio and things like that. So I don't know if any of that has changed due to remote work. No one's really attending yoga these days, but I did want to ask, Jennifer, what advice would you give to somebody who's just using something like a video interview for the first time, since you guys have kind of become power users of it?
Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure that you are including various pieces or various clips throughout the experience for the candidate. So one, so that they understand, what's expected of them. Two, just kind of an introduction to the company. We have a video called We Are One Verisk that just gives like a really nice highlight about the company, what we do, our people, and then the experience overall, making sure that recruiters who are using the tool, actually does a videotape of themselves asking the question, so that when the candidate takes the interview, they see that recruiter. So it's not quite yet a face-to-face, but it still gives that one-to-one interaction, making them more comfortable when they provide their response.
Awesome. And Ariel, you mentioned things like text recruit and how you kind of conveniently were implementing that right at the beginning of COVID, and the timing really worked out for you. What advice would you give people as well who are just using something like that for the first time?
I would say that it's really, in order for the text to apply to really work for you, you have to make sure that you come up with some creative graphics to really get that idea, that tool out there so people can see it. If people don't see it, you're not going to see much of a response, and as many applicants that are utilizing that tool. I think that is really the biggest piece when it comes to text to apply, and so it's really important, again, to make sure that you get that word out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that. This is, all about digital transformation and making technology work for you. So those pieces of advice, I'm sure, are really helpful to our audience. I do have a couple questions here that I want to get your thoughts on. This is probably for Jennifer. How are your teams training and conducting orientation? Or maybe it's not for Jennifer. I was interpreting that as a remote work question, but I think it applies to both of you here. So how are your teams training and conducting orientation?
So we're doing a weekly virtual orientation where new hires come together with someone from our employee experience team just to do a high-level overview of the company, the benefits, policies, procedures, and then it's also a big part of what managers are doing in preparing during the pre-boarding stage, putting together the agenda, one-to-one introductions for the employee with each of the colleagues that they'll be working with. So, and it's worked. We try to make sure that all of our new joiners start on a specific day every week so that they can have that experience kind of coming through the virtual door on day one. And we've found that, you know, they've reacted really well because it gives them that opportunity, like I said before, to get, you know, connected with IT, up and running on their laptops, and then they sit through that orientation with other new colleagues that are joining the company on the same day.
And with us, we are, you know, our work is in person. Our employees work in the restaurant, so it's hard to do a virtual orientation. Ultimately, they're going to end up in the restaurant. So we're just making sure that we are following by all the state regulations and guidelines as far as, you know, masks, washing your hands often, making sure you're keeping that distance. So a lot of our general managers are, when they're conducting that orientation, they'll bring out their laptop to the lobby, you know, sit across, you know, with enough distance to the employee, and then just kind of letting them learn on their own with our computer programs, and then making sure, again, when we're doing the actual training piece, that we're keeping that distance from each other. We're wearing our masks, wearing them properly, making sure that we're washing our hands often, especially if it's around an area that's used a lot by a few different people, like the registers, making sure that we're cleaning everything, and making sure, again, that we're just following by all the guidelines to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have another question here. How can we get more people to apply to our job postings? This is from someone in the salon business. So I think this is probably the $1 million question for everyone who answered that getting applicants in was their top challenge in our poll earlier. But Ariel, I know that you mentioned, you know, people are hesitant to come back. Is there anything you're trying, any advice you would give, any strategies on getting people to apply right now?
Yeah, so we rely a lot on our third-party partners to help us with some sponsored ads and making sure that we're getting the word out there to as many people as possible. The more people that you can reach, the more applications that you're going to get. On top of that, we always make sure, again, to keep that communication piece. What we're doing through COVID. A lot of people are nervous right now to go back to work, so making sure they know what to expect, how you're planning to, you know, keep them safe, I think is a really good process to have as well, just for that communication piece. And then, you know, it used to be, you used to be able to do hiring events. You used to be able to, you know, go and visit community centers and really get the word out that way, and it's not really available anymore. However, they are coming out with a lot more virtual hiring events, you know, and I think that those types of things and really getting into the digital world and getting the word out there that you're hiring is the best way to do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jennifer, I know that that's not your exact scenario, but is there anything that you would add to this question?
Yeah, I think what we are doing and looking to do more of is just looking at different platforms that we can utilize to promote our jobs. So, you know, we are now utilizing our alumni network website to promote a list of, you know, interesting jobs every week. We're going to be doing that also with our employee networks, sometimes looking at certain jobs that we can post internally first before we post externally to encourage that internal mobility. And I think that also through kind of enhancing an employee referral program, so tapping our existing employees to look through their networks and just promote the opportunities that we're hiring for, will really help kind of beef up the overall applicant pool for a lot of our positions.
Yeah, and Jennifer, if I'm remembering correctly, Verisk has a really strong university recruiting program. So I imagine that's something that looks different now. How has that had to change?
Yeah, so right now our interns are virtual, so it's the first program that's been 100% remote. The feedback that I've been seeing, this information that we've gathered from not only hiring managers but also the interns themselves, they've really enjoyed it. They feel they're doing meaningful work. I think some are surprised that it can actually work 100% virtual, but overall the response has been really good.
That's good to hear. Let's see, I've got another question here. How do you handle folks who accept roles but don't want to come back yet? So this again might be for some of those on-site roles. Ariel, what would you say to that?
That is something that we have ran into and continue to run into. So really, you know, again, with our furloughed employees, when we reach out to them, see if they're ready and willing to come back to work, a lot of them are telling us either they're nervous to come back to work or, you know, again, they make more money on the unemployment, and so they are not ready to come back to work. And so we're really providing some good talking points to our area directors and everyone who are holding these calls with the candidates. And we're just honest with them. We're letting them know that we're opening up our dining rooms. Work has to continue. And, you know, unfortunately, we cannot guarantee that we will have an opportunity or your position when you're ready to come back, because the work has to continue.
Yeah, I think we heard something similar on a recent webinar we did where Lifetime Fitness was a guest, and their head of talent was saying the same thing. Like, we want to be as empathetic and as understanding as possible, and we want to offer people their jobs, these jobs, whether it's they're returning or it's a new job offer. But just as a business, you know, things have to move forward in one way or another. So yeah, that sounds like the experience for a lot of businesses right now. Let's see, we've got several more questions. I don't know if I'm reading this one correctly, but it sounds like, you know, challenges that the applicant has and possibly them getting frustrated. So this really, to me, sounds like a candidate experience question. Is there anything in your candidate experience that's changed or that's working really well, or something that wasn't working that you needed to fix? Maybe you could add some color there. Jennifer, let's start with you.
Yeah, and I think that has been an issue, one that we addressed but even before the current situation. So just looking for ways that we can shorten and make the entire application process as easy as possible, very concise, just gathering key pieces of information that we need to get someone into our applicant tracking system and a resume. And then for the most part, as we move along the interview process and eventually hiring process, then we gather the more in-depth information from the candidate. So really just making it as quick as possible, encouraging as many people as possible to apply.
Yeah, I mean, seamless candidate experience, a simple candidate experience is something that I know all companies are striving for. Ariel, what would you add to that?
I would say one thing that I've noticed, especially right now through COVID, is that communication, or lack of communication, I should say. A lot of people who have lost their positions and they're applying to so many jobs, and they don't hear back from anyone. And so being able to communicate or, you know, utilize those automatic responses and letting people know, you know, once they submit an application, they'll get a response that says, you know, hey, we're still hiring. You know, we'll get to your application as soon as possible, especially through COVID. It has put it, you know, it has set a longer process through COVID. Or, you know, we have currently put our hiring on hold. We'll keep your application on file, and we will reach out to you as soon as we, you know, start filling some of our roles again. So again, that communication piece is very important. You can't take the human piece out of human resources. So again, I can't reiterate enough how much the communication means a lot to a lot of people right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. We've got one more question for the panelists here, but before we move on to that, I just want to let everybody know that if you need the SHRM code, I chatted that out, so grab that before the webinar closes today. Okay, let's move to the last question we have here. And I would just love to know from each of you, you know, what's number one piece of advice or your number one lesson that you've learned in your digital transformation journey? Jennifer, let's start with you.
Sure. I think the most important piece is leading people through it to accept it, to understand the benefits of it and the time that it can create for them to do more meaningful work. And just going back to an earlier point, just over communicating, making sure that people are very clear about what's going on from a safety perspective, what expectations will be, what the plan is for going forward, even if we're not 100% sure of what that is, but just continually providing updates and just, you know, making sure that people feel important and informed. I think that would be my main takeaway and most important piece through it all.
Very true. Ariel, what would you say?
I would say that, you know, it is a really great asset or tool to have on your site, especially through the current environment. You know, it's very difficult to recruit the organic way, again, such as, you know, hiring events or visiting schools or community centers. So, you know, digital hiring really helps you out in that process. And if you are not set up with the digital, anything digital right now, you don't have to, you know, transition completely, but at least there's a few tools out there that can be really beneficial to you. You know, I would get on board with that and ask questions, or, you know, reach out to other companies if it's needed, if you need more information or advice, because honestly, it's here to stay. I think that it's part of the new normal.
Yeah, and I love what you said about this is really, you transform a little bit at a time. You're never 100% there and 100% done. I mean, this is certainly a journey that everybody's on right now. So thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Tim. So glad to have all of your insight and your advice on this webinar today. And thank you, everyone in the audience. Make sure to grab your SHRM code, and I hope to see you back for our next webinar. Thank you.
Bye.